firstborn, wanted to buy a desk for the living room. So he brought to me this proposal, written out, dimensioned, all the furniture rearranged, and he showed me how this could work. So I looked at it and I said, it looks good. And in the proposal was the removal of one of the furnitures which could not occupy the same space at the same time, so I had to agree to that, and we already wanted to get rid of one of the pieces of furniture anyway, so it all worked out. When we buy something new for the house, you have to have an idea of where it's going to go. Because if you don't know where it's going to go and you bring it in, then you're going to scramble to try to fit it wherever it's supposed to go. So my wife told me, because of our kitchen space, no more new devices. So I can't even buy like a chopper or a grill machine. I can't do it, but she can. She recently bought a George Foreman grill because she thought that was going to be really, really convenient. And so we had to make room for it and get rid of some other things. It's hard to bring in new furniture and then try to rearrange the house. But that's exactly how people live. Christians live like that. Their approach to life is bring Jesus in the house, and then, what do we do? How do we rearrange the furniture? How do we fit Jesus in? I mean, he looked good in the store. He was a great buy, but does he really fit into my life? Where should he really go? It's time to decide. But if you try to decide when he's in the house, it's much harder than if you decided before you brought him in. One of the reasons why Jesus shares the parable of the king who is about to go to war, he says you have to make a decision. They have 20,000 people and we have 10,000 people. Are we able to win? Because if we are not able to win, then we might as well just make peace. So we have to consider what we're getting into before we get into it. Just because you look still, you don't just jump in. I didn't want to become a Christian just because, I wanted to go to heaven. I had to really think about what am I really getting into? Because if I really become a Christian, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to have to be obedient. I have to follow. I have to do what he wants, not what I want. Do I really want to do that? Did you really want to do that? So I struggled with that because I didn't want to have somebody tell me what to do for the next 60 years. I was 20 at the time, and I was hoping I would live to 80. So, worst case scenario, I'm going to have to be obedient for 60 years of my life to somebody who would tell me what to do and where to go and how to think and how to live. Okay? Let me caution you right at this point. When you want somebody to become a Christian, don't hurry him. You understand? You just don't want to get him into heaven without thinking through all of this stuff. You don't want to have him purchase something and then take it to the house and go, oh, where do I fit this man? Where do I fit the Lord? No. You are doing the person a disservice by not giving them things to think about, not giving him a comprehensive understanding of what he's getting into. You're not giving him time to think it over. Is it 20,000 versus 10,000? Do I have enough money to build? Yes, I understand your compassion, I understand your love for the person, I understand that you want the person to end up in heaven instead of hell. Yes, that's all true, and those things are vital. But that's not the way Jesus did it. Jesus wasn't in a big fat hurry to get people into heaven or to a relationship with Him. As a matter of fact, He let some go. He said, bye. If you don't want it, that's okay. That's your choice. See you. You go, what? Isn't that kind of cruel? No, that's not cruel. That's the way it is. So here we are, having second thoughts because we brought Jesus into the house and now we don't know what to do with Him. They said to Him, these are the Jewish leaders. Jesus was having a conversation with them and they had an objection. Why do you hang out with sinners and tax collectors? And Jesus told them just before this text that the sick people are the ones who need the doctor, not the people who are well. And they go, oh yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That we should go after the people who think that they need salvation, not the people who don't think they need salvation. Right? So, if people go, no, I don't need salvation, okay, then you can move on. If people say, I really need it, yeah. If people confess to you, my life is a mess. Well, have you tried Jesus? Did you put Him on the bottom of your list? Then you give it to Him. So the people who are the ones who are desperate for it, they get my attention. And Jesus is here. He asked this bottom of the barrel tax collector named Levi, and He said, follow me, and he agreed to it. And so He spent some time with him at his house. And because he had all these non-Christian friends, Jewish leaders and dignitaries and people who were using him for his money, they all showed up at his house, and here's Jesus. And then all the religious leaders were there, and they asked him this question. John's disciples often fast and pray, and so did the disciples of the Pharisees. But yours go on eating and drinking. What's up with that? So the religious leaders are asking an appropriateness question. Seasons of fasting and praying occur in the Jewish tradition, of course. And although praying is mentioned, the question was more about fasting than anything else. We can tell by the response that Jesus has to the question, He spends the time to explain the fasting part, not the praying part. So apart from the times of fasting, other times of fasting, the weekly fast took place Mondays and Thursdays. Every week. This wasn't like the Muslim holiday of 40 days of fasting, where they don't eat from sunup to sundown, and then they gorge themselves at night, and then do it again the next day, and then gorge themselves at night, and then do it again the next day. They have big parties right after the sun goes down. I mean, they eat like, you don't think they eat? They eat. Okay? The Jews used to do that. The leaders held a fast Mondays and Thursdays. So if the disciples were eating on Mondays and Thursdays, of course they'll be visible. And everybody would see that. Well, aren't those Jesus' disciples? How come they're eating? They're supposed to be fasting. And he had an objection to that. These leaders had an objection to Jews not keeping Jewish traditions. So for some reason, the religious leaders are meddling in Jesus' affairs and his leadership of his own disciples. And the question was concerning his leadership and the sacredness of the Jewish traditions. But Jesus doesn't tell them that they had a bad question. He doesn't rebuke them for meddling. Jesus affirms the fasting and the praying because he doesn't rebuke them. And so we realize it's not the fasting and the praying is the principle of appropriateness that he's talking about, because we know that fasting and praying is advocated during his Sermon on the Mount. He declared it. He said, when you fast, don't let anybody know. When you pray, don't let anybody know. Make those things very, very private. Yeah, public times of praying exist. Yes, public times of fasting exist. But generally speaking, when you pray, when you fast, don't announce it like the hypocrites do. So he says, let me tell you what is appropriate about fasting and praying, and this is the principle. Jesus said in verse 34, can you make the guests of the bridegroom fast when he is with them? But the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them. In those days, they will fast. Very short answer. He says, fasting is inappropriate in a wedding. Who fasts during a wedding? You should never fast during a wedding. It's like having a comedian at a funeral. You're not going to have a comedian perform at a funeral. I mean, it would have to be a really, really eccentric funeral. Okay? Totally inappropriate. So Jesus says it is inappropriate for us to fast during a wedding. And who's the bridegroom? The bridegroom is Jesus. So when Jesus is leading and he's there is no fasting because you don't fast during a wedding. They understood that. They realized what was going on. So he was letting them know, giving them food for thought, and saying what is appropriate is during this time you don't fast, and there will be a time when they will fast when I'm taken away. Now, it started with that question, is it appropriate to fast right now? And then when he answers it, he doesn't stop. He doesn't say, okay, lesson over, justification over, reasoning over. Because then he pulls out a parable. And why does he pull out a parable? He says in verse 36, he said to them this parable, no one tears a patch from a new garment and sews it on an old one. If he does, he will have torn the new garment, and the patch from the new will not match the old. No one pours new wine into old wineskins. If he does, the new wine will burst the skins, the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, new wine must be poured into new wineskins. And no one after drinking old wine wants the new one, for he says the old is better. So you go, why is Jesus telling them this parable? Well, I mean, it makes sense. The physics of it makes sense. The experience that they've had makes sense. Skins are really good containers for liquids because they don't have leaks. You know, when you take that and you wrap it like this, put the top on. But he pulls this parable out to say something even further than their question. So he says, let me tell you, in addition to what's going on here in the area of appropriateness, I'm going to tell you about new wine and new wineskin. So what is he talking about? He says, two things happen when you mix old and new. It gets ugly, and it ruins both. Right? Two things happen when you put the old and the new together, and you keep both. Both of them are ruined, and it becomes ugly. Okay? So, physical illustration. Let's say I had this suit on with a tie from 10 years ago. Okay, all the ladies are going. Let's say we took contemporary furniture and put it in your old house. Somebody walks in and goes, nice furniture. The decor just doesn't go. If you took new electronics and put it in your old house, it's just going to look funny. It's going to clash. So that's a brief physical illustration of what happens if you put the new and the old together. And he says, that's what happens when you take new wine and put it into old wineskin. It's just going to burst and both are going to be ruined. It's going to look ugly. Let's say I played basketball in my suit. Somebody's going to walk in the gym and go, what in the world is he doing? He's ruining his shoes. He's going to ruin his suit. He's going to sweat all over it. Even dry cleaning probably won't take that out. It's just going to be a mess, and it's going to look inappropriate. So Jesus is declaring for us something greater than just appropriateness here. He's expanding on their question, and he wants to emphasize there's something that I want you to understand. I have brought in a new thing, and I want you to embrace the new thing. Putting the old life and the new life together is going to make a mess. What do I mean by that? Primarily it is this. Jesus brings in a new agenda. He has a new kingdom principle that he is demonstrating. He's cleaning house. He's casting out demons, which didn't happen in the Old Testament. Okay? Not in the way that Jesus did it. There was music, soothing music that expelled evil spirit from Saul when David played beautiful music. Does that mean, and I thought about this too, because it could be very, very practical. Does it mean bad music attracts demons? Think about that. Can we attract demons with our music? When Jesus brings in his new kingdom, he conquers everything. He unravels everything. He disturbs everything. The new wineskin can't handle it. The old wineskin can't handle it. The new wine can't be housed by the old wineskin. The old life can handle the new life of Jesus. So he steps into your old life, and he wants to unravel everything, and you want to hang on to your old life. It's not going to work. It's going to pop. But I want to keep it. Remember, the old wine is better. I don't like the stress of the new wine. Jesus comes and says, if you don't give up your life, you're dead. But if you die because you give it up, then you really live. He who tries to save his life will lose it, but he who loses his life for me will find it. Finally, when people try to seek some nirvana, enlightenment, whatever it is, and they think that they found it and it has nothing to do with Jesus, they're twice dead. Even though they think, I discovered it, this is it. I don't care who says it. Oprah, Dr. Phil, whoever says this is it and it has nothing to do with Jesus, that's twice dead. You have to give up your life for him in order to save it. If you don't, and you try to hang on to your life because that's what you think your life is, then you've already lost it. As Christians, with our old lives, if we don't appropriate it, this is what's going to happen. It's going to destroy both of them. The old wineskin is going to burst. Eventually it will burst. You won't be able to hang on to it. Otherwise you have to squeeze the new wine out. In order for you to survive, Jesus has to be squeezed out. how do I fit Jesus into my studies? That's actually the wrong question. The wrong question. How do I fit Jesus into my studies? That's just like putting new wine into old wineskin. Rather, the appropriate question is, how does my studies fit into Jesus' agenda for me? You understand? So, parents, they say, oh man, we can't handle it. We can only have two. Maybe one, of each gender. And this is the logic and the reasoning behind the two per family these days. And Christians, we all bought into it. Okay. If we can't get one of each gender, then two is just maximum, because they're just way too expensive. And all the children are going, you're expensive, because we want more. They probably carry around about $400 to $600 worth of stuff in their pockets. You know it's true, because if you have a phone, that's worth about $400 to $600, right? Retail price. How do we fit Jesus into our studies is the wrong question. The appropriate question is, how do we fit, or how does studies fit into Jesus' agenda for my life? What shall we do with it? How do children fit into Jesus' agenda for our lives as husband and wife? So instead of asking these questions, how can I fit Jesus into my job? Or how can I fit Jesus into my relationship with my boyfriend or girlfriend, What part should he play in it? How can I fit Jesus into my house? How can I fit Jesus into my plans for the future? How can I fit Jesus into my whatever? No. If you try to do that, you're still trying to pour new wine into old wineskin. No, you have to start with the new wine. Period. It is life centered around the new wine. What does new wine require? New wine requires new wineskin. Your life has to be new. It's going to center around the new wine. It's going to center around Jesus. It's not going to be your life and then Jesus peppered in, salt and peppered in. That's not going to work. Because he's just going to explode that skin. He's going to dismantle your life. It's going to be upsetting. It's going to be painful. But if you start with Jesus first and then say, okay, where and what and how do I live life now? I know that's really, really difficult. It's really difficult to say, okay, Jesus first and then everything else around it. Because we have to dismantle our lives. And if you don't feel a sense of that, you don't have the right Jesus. If you don't feel a sense that Jesus is dismantling your life and he wants to do something totally brand new and he wants to have your life and only your life and he can't accommodate your agenda to his, then you go, that's the real Jesus. I remember regretting my decision to become a Christian. Yeah, that's for real. And you should. There should be a regret. It's just like, man, so many people, okay? So many people, right after they get married, they say, oh, I think I married the wrong one. I think I married the wrong person. Good night. Ask them. If they're honest with you, they'll tell you, yeah, I think I married the wrong person. What are you going to do now? What are What are you going to do now? No. Yeah, there is some part of that because your character is being challenged. But even if you have those feelings, you stick with your spouse for the rest of your life because that's what you're committed to. And then right after I became a Christian, I said, oh no, now I've got to follow through on my promise to follow Jesus for the rest of my life. It's going to be so hard. I knew it was going to be hard because I knew what I was getting into, but now that I'm in it, the reality is for real. And so then I thought, oh, man, what do I do? What do I do? How do I live? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do with my studies? What do you want me to do with my friends? What do you want me to do with my house? I didn't have an apartment. With my stuff, whatever stuff I had. What do you want me to do with my clothes? What do you want me to do with my music? What do you want me to do with my book? What do you want me to do with my friends? What do you want me to do with anything that I have? What do you want me to do? If I need to get rid of it, get rid of it. If I need to give it away, I need to give it away. If I need to modify it, make something else out of it. Trying to fit Jesus into your life is never going to work. Jesus says it's never going to work. It's going to look ugly and it's going to ruin both. Did you ever try? Did you ever try to walk on a fence for a long time? You don't go very far until you fall. And you fall either way. You can fall into the old life or you can fall into the new life. You can fall into the good pasture, you can fall into the bad pasture. You can fall to the outside or you can fall to the inside. You can't walk on there very long. And you know, movies, they sometimes do this really, really well. Two vehicles, they're driving side by side, and the guy has a leg on each. And they start expanding. Their legs are only so far apart or so long, and then eventually they're going to have to fall off, or they're going to have to pick a vehicle. Either you jump on this one or you jump on that one. That one may have the enemy and that one may have the friend, but you might end up on the enemy's car because it took you too long to decide and your balance swayed you over there. You have to decide, what kind of wineskin are you going to be? The new wine is not going to change. You have it, and you have to deal with it. And you have to get to the point where we say, Jesus, I'm going to center my life around you. What should I do with my life, no matter what area it is? You're confronted by that today and every day, and the longer you decide, or the longer you wait to decide what you're going to do, the harder it's going to be, because you'll be riding that fence where you'll have one foot in one vehicle and one foot in another one as they split apart. What kind of wineskin are you? You have to decide what kind of wineskin you're going to be. Jesus wants you to be new wineskin, so that you pour His life into you, and everything will be well. It will look appropriate. It will look good. It will taste good. And everything will be contained. It will be sustained. It will not run out. It will not leak. It will not be damaged or ruined. You will have both. If you really want the healed kind of life, the preserved kind of life, the appropriate kind of life, then you have to center your